Oh, hey, my name is Nick Hughes. We're here on Founders Live, and we are joined today with Genevieve Le Marchal. How are you doing today?
Good.
Good. And where are you sitting right now?
I am in my new office in Southeast Portland, Oregon.
Oh, that's great. That's great. What area of Portland is the new office in?
It's in inner Southeast. If you're familiar with Portland, it's kind of right around that Sandy Burnside intersection. Pretty close to a lot of cool stuff. The approximate cross streets are 8th and Pine for those of you who like Portland and know the area.
Awesome. That's great. And I understand this is your first day in the office.
Well, it's the first day that I've been here with my stuff. So kind of, I've been here, getting everything installed and everything, but we're here actually, we have someone here getting ready to do space planning for us, and it's a big mess right now, but yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. Well, hey, thanks for joining us, and I'm really excited to get into some of the things that you're working on. But before we get into a lot of the information around, some of the stuff you're doing around sales and all that cool stuff, I'm just curious, tell us about your background a little bit, and what are you working on currently?
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur pretty much. I think I've probably been employed, relatively small fraction of my actual career. My background is pretty diverse, generally all in entrepreneurship, but it spans everything from being in a SaaS company that, raised money the traditional way, venture capital, scaled, was acquired, and then IPO'd shortly after, all the way to digital agencies. I've started businesses in the Amazon rainforest
Wow.
from a supply chain standpoint. I've worked as a rental car agent, counter agent person. I've been a coffee barista. Sort of run the gamut of things, but for the most part, for the last, 4 to 5 years, and really the foreseeable future, I've been an entrepreneur.
That's great. And man, you wide range of experiences,
I know
and
it's even crazier.
I bet. And I've got those as well. So you now are an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about your company and what do you do?
Yeah, so my company is called Sadie, and what we do is high volume apparel, accessories, and product photography for brand retailers. So if you are a company, for instance, Pendleton, Timbuktu, and Hannah Anderson are a couple of our clients, you have a large catalog of stuff that you're selling: t-shirts, bags, shirts, shoes, whatever. And these things need to be photographed. And this type of photography is actually very, very technical and really a very special type of photography that not a lot of people really specialize in. And my company does this, and we found ways to scale it. We found ways to make it much more efficient and also maintain quality standards.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think that there's a huge need. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands, maybe more, retailers and e-commerce sites out there that just don't have access to this type of quality to capture the products that then they're selling,
Yeah,
right?
a lot of them do not. Yeah, and in fact, I think if you go on Shopify and their blogs, or if you're subscribed to their newsletters, how to shoot your product photography is probably like, seems like it's 80% of the content on there is trying to help people get better product shots.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's cool. And so I think a good turn here is, how did you come into focus on sales strategies, and why do you think is sales so important? Was there like an experience you had in your own company that you're like, oh man, like I need to focus on this? Like, where did this come from?
Yeah, well, so I started off as a lot of entrepreneurs do, thinking that I kind of knew what I was supposed to do. I'm supposed to create an idea, kind of get to a very general proof of concept and then go raise some money. And so that's what I was doing. I was really focusing all of my time and all of my attention because I was told that fundraising is a full-time job. And I was chasing my tail, running all over town, trying to raise money, venture capital, from people who honestly were never going to give me anything. They were not going to give me money. And I was pitching endlessly and being led down dead ends, and just eventually got to the point where I realized that my company was just withering on the vine because we weren't going to raise money. I was wasting my time and we really needed cash. And so that's when, there's a couple chain of events that sort of led to this, but it ended up being a really, really difficult, probably one of the worst times in my life. And I realized that a lot of the problems that I was having at that moment could all be attributed to a lack of cash, which was attributed to a lack in sales, and that sales would fix everything. And it was that moment that I'm like, Mark Cuban is right, sales will fix it. And so, but I didn't really know what to do. I'm like, how do you actually sell things to people? It seems kind of weird. And like, I worked as a rental car counter agent, and I know how we were taught to sell damage insurance protection on cars. And I was like, I don't want to do that. That's, I decided to make it my mission to really, really learn how to build sales pipeline. And, my company is a B2B company. So I learned B2B sales, enterprise sales. And then I started just kind of by extension, not by on purpose, teaching other entrepreneurs how to do it too.
Wow. And yeah, so it's awesome. You basically learned from your experience, a lot of these principles and a lot of these things to do. And now you're turning around and helping other founders, which is, I think that's great.
It's fun. It's like the best. It's the absolute best thing ever.
Yeah. And so tell us about that real quick before we get into some detailed, questions and answers. What does the fall look like? What are you offering?
Yeah, so a couple projects. One of the things that's coming out is as a result of having founders gathering in my kitchen of my house, bringing laptops and cords stretched everywhere, and my fridge open, snacks and everything. It eventually sort of disseminated out, but it wasn't because it wasn't working. It was because everyone got so busy growing their pipeline. And so I'm meeting all these people one-on-one. I'm doing all this one-on-one stuff. I'm like, this is really great, but I'm actually teaching the same thing over and over again because we created a process and a system. So I created a course on an online platform, a marketplace, that quickly became the #1 top-selling course. And then I learned a really important lesson about controlling your own channels. That marketplace changed their pricing policies and changed a lot of the things that made them valuable, at least to me, and the value was suddenly gone. So I went back to the drawing board, completely revamped the course from the very beginning, re-recorded it all, redid all the curriculum is new, and I'm relaunching this online course. It's called Roadmap to Revenue, and that launches soft here in August and launches live in September.
That is great. That is great. I know I'm going to be checking it out. I'm very, very focused in on this area in the next 3 to 6 months. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, a lot of people want to finish the year strong. And I think that's also, you suggested too, like, hey, after September, I think you're going to see more traction. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Because a lot of people September is the end of Q3, and a lot of people just want to kind of power through Q4 and like hit those end of year goals or get to certain benchmarks. I know a lot of entrepreneurs who want to qualify for EO or something next year and things like that. And so I think it's a good timing for it.
Yes, it is. It is very much. So, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, there might be a lot of people watching here that basically are like, geez, I'm not a salesman, but my company really needs to start growing revenue and validating with actual customers. Where do they even start? Like, where's a starting point for someone thinking about getting into a sales process?
Well, I think what you really need to consider when you're starting with a sales process is your thing that you're coming to the market with is probably not the ultimate thing that's going to scale your company. And that's okay. Because for a lot of us, we're still learning, we're developing, we're changing, and there's a certain discomfort with knowing that it's like a perfectionism tendency that we have. We know how good it can be and it's not there yet. So I think that's the first thing, is understanding that. The second thing is also sometimes you just need the cash flow. Your business just needs the money in the door. And that's something that it seems like it's almost taboo to talk about. Like, you can't say, we just need the money. People are like, no, the vision, the dream, don't give up. You're not giving up. There's many pathways to the same destination. And so there's two different approaches. Sometimes it's get over your perfectionism and launch your thing, improve it over time. And then there's other things that are like, what's the low-hanging fruit? What can you sell right now to bring in, cash for your business and keep you going and get you to the next step? Because you're cultivating relationships with customers. And if you're doing it right, these people are going to stay with you and they'll buy the next thing. Or, you'll upgrade them to that when it gets better because they're a loyal customer. So I think that's something that is, really important to know coming out the bat, that it's okay if you're here and it needs to be here, like right. Be okay with it.
Yeah. And so do you think, let's say that person that's like, kind of like, they're not a salesman, they're a little nervous. Yeah. What do you think is the main reason that they might be in that position? Is it they're not confident on their product or service, or they're literally just an introvert and like do not want to get out there and just, hammer the phones and the doors?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think those play into each other. When you're not feeling like your product or your service is where you want it to be yet, you don't feel comfortable going out there and selling it because you're like, I know it can be better. I don't want this person to pay, for something that I know can be better. And so I think we're really like, we inherently want to serve, and we feel that we're doing someone a disservice if we know here we're not delivering the thing that we believe we can create. And so I think that that's kind of where it comes from. And then after you kind of get over that initial step of saying, okay, I know that it's not there yet, but there's value here. It's just saying like, I'm willing to do it, but I don't know what to do. Like, do I like knock on doors? Do I call people? What do I do? And a lot of people are like, I'm not afraid of the work, but I don't know what it is.
Right. Yeah. And, we'll definitely want to get to some of those like really specific things, but, I think you mentioned something earlier, shouldn't a founder be focused on raising money from investors, or how does raising funds fall into this entire equation?
Well, so I think, I definitely have a different way of thinking about it than a lot of people do, but I believe that a founder doesn't need to focus on raising money. They need to focus on building value. And a lot of investors aren't going to give you very good terms if you don't have value. And I think that's what we see a lot of times is we get out there with this idea and we expect that we should get investment for it so we can get it off the ground, but your idea is not really worth anything. And so it takes a while to build value. And the people who say like, oh, it took me 6 months, I think they're lying. Like, actually, I'll like just be honest. Like, I know they're lying. It didn't take them 6 months. They're just saying that because it sounds better than it took me 3 years. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's a few, and by a few, I mean a very small portion of companies that need to be raising money. And that's because like they're building a technology product that is extremely, that literally can't go to market until it's done, for instance. And something like that, like, yeah, there's some instances where venture capital is required, but if you think about it, there's a lot of ways around it. And I think that I like to try to encourage people that I work with to think about the way around it. One entrepreneur I know is talking about building this custom software, and she's like, I need investment. We need to build this custom software. And we sit down and start talking about what the software needs to do. And about 15 minutes in the conversation, I'm like, you need Shopify. You need Shopify and like, a couple $1,000s a budget for customization to make the user interface not look like Shopify. But really, that's what you need. Why don't we just do that? And that's one way for her to say, I can continue to build value in my business, grow revenue, and retain ownership. It doesn't mean that she's not going to raise money. In fact, you get to a certain point in your business where what got you here isn't going to be what gets you here. But once she's here, she can raise money at way more preferential terms than she ever would be able to otherwise. So.
Yeah, and it's I feel like I could go quite far and deep into the reasons why, but I feel that a lot of the media today and a lot of the things that we read, and even like you go to conferences and you hear them talk, and a lot of people are they just hammer down the go talk to investors, go raise money thing.
Oh yeah.
And it's become so default of thought process that I think everyone's lost the concept of, wait, maybe you get traction and you get customers and you get revenue before you actually can and should go raise money. Mm-hmm. And so this is what I like about what you're doing is you're bringing it back to the basics. And like you said, there are some companies that actually will need to go raise money quick, like right now, because they're building technology, they're doing something very
biotech. Like, are you patenting a drug?
Yeah.
Venture capital for that.
But most people aren't, right? And yet when they read in TechCrunch, oh, such and such raised a seed round or like, a Series A of like $5 million, every other founder thinks that that's the route, the only route.
I was right there. Like, I was totally like, not just thinking I needed to do that, but being like, I need to be on the cover of TechCrunch. I'm going to raise the biggest round from the highest profile VC fund. Woo,
Yeah.
And like, what am I doing? Like,
and what do you think that the main result of thinking like that was in your business and in you personally?
I mean, the main result, the end result of thinking like that and pursuing that was almost losing the business, incredible stress, tension with all my family and my friends and people that I loved, stress and upset within myself that I wasn't meeting these expectations and feeling like I had no other choices, feeling like walls were closing in on me, because it's just me hoping that this person says yes, because, and that's just not a place you want to be. You don't want to be in the position where you're like, oh, please say yes. You want to be in the position where you're like, you're asking me and I get to say yes or no. That's a much
so another question that comes up in my mind is, outside of like just instant cash flow, which is absolutely, lifeblood of a company, what are some other benefits of sales, especially in an early stage company?
Well, I think the biggest benefit to sales in an early stage company is really getting super clear on what your customer is willing to say yes to. I mean, there's a lot of people who will take your survey and will tell you they think what you're doing is cool. But at the end of the day, that's worth like a little bit. But ultimately, you're just trying to figure out if you're articulating your idea clearly. What you need is someone to give you money for it. People can tell you something is a cool idea all day long. But like for me, there's very little that I'm actually willing to pay for. So if someone gives you money for it, then you know that you're on the right track. And I think that that's the biggest thing with sales. Then the other big thing is you learn after you're talking to customers, pitching, what they kind of glob onto. You can say my product is the fastest, and they're like, like my product is the best, it's the prettiest, or, like my product's the most efficient, it'll save money and it'll help you make more money. Oh, well, that I'm interested in, and so now, other activities with marketing where you're going to start honing in the language on your website or making a promotional video, what to hammer on to get people to be like, yes, I want this, but you wouldn't otherwise know that if you didn't spend all this time telling people what your product did and listening to them be not interested and then see where they are interested. And then, the flip side, your team gets to start actually fulfilling real things with real customers. And you can be like, oh, this thing that I thought was a big deal, no one cares. Not profitable, not interesting. This other thing here, people are willing to pay for that. So let's explore this option, And that's something you can't do until you have real, actual paying, like warm bodies in the door,
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is it's the whole like, it's when, you hear a number of people talk about like, essentially going and get market validation and talking to early customers. What this is actually more than that, which is, because I think a lot of times when people talk about that, especially like the lean movement, it's like, oh, you need to go and get you need to go talk to 100 or 500 people to get a validated concept of what you're really building and the value to them. Mm-hmm. But what you're describing is, this is like literally, this is sales. This is like go out, talk to people, talk to companies, and actually get a sale, get money, get them to write a check for the value that you're providing them, whether it is a product or a service, and doing that on a larger and larger scale. And again, it's like, it kind of fascinates me that this is almost common sense, but it seems to be not sometimes the main driving force that a lot of early stage companies are focused on.
Yeah, well, I think that that's a good observation, because who's writing a lot of the startup literature and who's the thought leaders? VCs.
Yeah.
And this is their area, so of course they talk about it this way because this is what they do. And you know, you've got people who have become really, really well known, not just in the startup world, but just kind of in general. People like Guy Kawasaki, and like, I mean, even this, you know, Shark Tank, and it's all about the investment. It's make or break. It's do or die. And you know, I think that we forget that there's like good old fashioned business practices. And, you know, you can be good at those and like you can be totally badass, and you don't need those things until you're ready for it. And then it's a lot more of a level playing field. And I think we just discount it. We think like it's not cool. It's not like what I'm supposed to do. And even if you look at accelerators, every accelerator's end goal is getting you in front of into a demo day. It's getting your pitch deck refined and getting you out there. And I'll even see events where they'll say, you know, come and learn about how to explain to investors how your company closes sales. And I'm like, what? How to explain to investors how your company closes? What about how to close sales for your company? You know? Yeah. But it's just all kind of circulated around this whole thing, and it's because these are the people producing the content, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, so as you're going through this process, and as you're teaching this whole thing, are you suggesting a founder go out and do all this work, or are you suggesting them just hire a sales team instantly and push them out the door to go get sales?
Yeah, well, this is part of, you know, my experience is I think the founder needs to do it. You are absolutely the first person in your business who needs to sell. One, for the validation aspects, two, for understanding your customers. But think about your business 5-10 years from now. Five years from now. Think about your business 5 years from now, and you have a sales team of like, I don't know, 5 reps or something like that, and a couple SDRs and some support people. You're the CEO, ideally still, and you're on a call every Monday with your sales team, and you're doing deal review, and you're not going to be very good or effective at deal review with your sales team, who represents the lifeblood of your business. Right. You haven't done that. And so if you've been in their shoes and you understand what they're doing, you're a much better coach, you're a much better leader, but you're also way better at forecasting. You'll be able to look at the pipeline, call BS, you know, your feet are held to the fire for the projections and for the forecasts that you're making. So you need to really be able to stand behind them and say, our forecasts are accurate, and I know they are because X, versus being like, my forecasts are accurate and I know they are because my sales team told me they are. Right. You know, your sales team probably is on commission, and they get bonused by, you know, probably driving up higher forecasts. So
at what point does that shift? At what point, and we're talking about, you know, we're really focusing on like the startup, the early stage, just trying to get the first 100,000, 200,000 in revenue. What stage do they hire on even some reps and or a head of sales that would take over that process?
I wouldn't hire a head of sales until sometimes you just meet the right person. And, you know, timing is never, you know, you always have an idea in your head of when that person's going to come along, and sometimes it's sooner. So I would hire the head of sales when you meet the right person. But otherwise, I would hire the head of sales maybe at the point where you are starting to either consider or you are closing your first real round on real, actual, like preferential, decent terms, not like you're begging round. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of when I would consider doing it, because at that point, that's when, and then there's one other caveat too. Depending on how your business is growing and what it is operations wise, sometimes, you know, a side effect of growth is messed up operations internally. And if you're getting to the point where you really, really need to be focusing it more on the operations of the business because of the growth, that might be a good time to bring in either a sales rep or a head of sales to continue driving that growth so that you can turn inward and keep the company operating and scaling effectively.
Right. Yeah. So let's actually jump into a little of the kind of nuts and bolts. You know, what would you say the first like 2 or 3 steps, you know, the first things that a founder really wants to focus in on as they write out get the campaign going, brainstorm, get it going, and start putting in some sales activity?
I wouldn't even do a campaign. That's the last thing I would do. I think the first thing that somebody needs to do is create a really, really deep, really super extensive customer profile. They need to create a customer profile that is so specific that when you read it to someone, people think it's a real person. They feel like they know them. And I think that that's step number one, is going through that exercise, because you don't want to get on the phone or face to face or anything with anybody and try to convince them that they have a pain that you don't know and don't understand.
Right.
And so even if you've never been in your customer's shoes, you can learn and understand about their pain by going through the exercise of creating a very deep and intensive customer profile.
And could you review maybe just a real world example, even from your business, just, how did you, in a very short little quick time, how did you get to that customer profile, the name, the description, all that stuff?
Yeah, well, so, I didn't create it until after having worked with a couple people for a little while, but it wasn't like, you don't have to go years in or anything until you create it. But I had a couple customers. I had a general idea of what they were like. And then honestly, I kind of sat down, and it was like a journaling activity in a way. And, my customer profile, I created off this, her name is Paige, and she's 35 years old, and, she is, stretched super thin. She's a founder of her business. She's been in business for 2 years. She lives in a apartment. She's dating a guy named Chad. He's very supportive, but he gets frustrated. They didn't get to see her very often, and kind of going on and on. And then, when you get to the parts where you're like, this is getting, what's her fears, what's her pains, you just have to kind of sit quietly with it and be like, what is she worried about? What is that? And be really super honest with yourself and be like, she's incredibly scared of failing, because she does not want her family and friends, who are already so concerned because they're not entrepreneurs, they don't understand what she's doing, and they want to support her, but they don't get it. And she doesn't want them to worry about her. She doesn't want them to, and she doesn't want that ultimate failure and everyone to say, I told you so. And she has to go back to the corporate world with her tail between her legs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With, a trail of financial ruin behind her and her dreams crushed. That's sort of the exercise you need to go down. And, then we have an enterprise customer, and her name is Rebecca, and she's a creative director, and I've created that whole thing for her too. So now, whether I'm walking the trade show floor of a show, or whether I'm on the phone talking to Paige, I can speak to these customers. And I'm not exactly saying like, I know what you're worried about at night, but there's a sense of understanding and empathy that can come through your voice when you know what they're going through.
Yeah. I think that's incredible. Okay, so after they get this persona and this customer profile, what would be the next thing that someone would go through?
After the persona and the customer profile, I like to look at, I like to start thinking a lot about channels. So channels is really important, because you have to start ultimately creating lists. You have to create targeted lists, and everything is about volume when you're first starting out. When you're first kickstarting this process, it's all about sending out a certain amount of prospecting emails, and it's a numbers game. That's how you jumpstart your growth. And then from there, you can start being way more strategic. You can start investing in targeting. You can do inbound, but it starts off as a numbers game. And what happens is, if you are going to prospect to 100 people, let's say, that week, and you expect 8 to 12% generally will reply, and you're going to close this, about 3% will become customers. Those 3% better be highly targeted, very specifically, picked people to become your customers, because all of a sudden those people are in your life. You're worried, you're thinking about them as you're making dinner, you're worried about, deploying your product for them as you're trying to sleep. And so you want to make sure that you think super hard about the channel and where you're finding these customers, because, if you just say, oh, this looks like a list of people who might be our customers, cool, scrape it. You could end up in a world of problems later. So thinking really hard about the channels. And also, it just makes your life easier when you're like, we need to keep the engine running. Where do we find the people?
Yeah.
That can trickle later into targeted advertising or, marketing, demand gen, things like that.
And would you recommend, when you talk about channels, I mean, would you recommend buying lists depending on the business industry? Would you recommend, going to trade shows and, getting, potential customers that way? Like, what sort of channels or what sort of actions would you take to start filling that pipeline?
Yeah, I don't recommend buying lists, not to start, because historically the quality of a purchase list is really low. You're going to get, anywhere from 10 to 30% of them are going to be bounces. So they're crap, they're throwaway. And a list isn't always cheap. So you have to think about the fact that, you spend, $2,000 on a list and 30% of those names don't work.
Yeah.
And then, but also your list is only as good as what you articulated that you needed the list to be. So if you don't understand really, really solidly what that list needs to be and where it needs to come from, then you're not going to get a quality list. So I recommend people in the very beginning, it's total grind. Build your first couple lists yourself. Just do it yourself so you understand how to do it. And then you can start outsourcing. But then the next step is with the trade shows. I highly recommend trade shows, but not until you have one or two kind of example customers to point to that are successful. You don't want to go to a trade show where you're typically trying to get your logos or your heavy hitters and being like, you're my first customer ever. That's not going to make anyone feel good. So, you generally want to get a couple under your belt, and then I definitely recommend getting to a trade show because logos are really powerful, and that will just amp up the efforts. You can say, we work with this company and that company, and people are like, oh, you work with them, you must be okay then. So I think that's really important. But to start, the first few weeks of the process, and really from kind of 0 to 90 days is what I teach. Those first 0 to 90 days are a grind, and it's manual. You're just out there just getting the customers and seeing what works.
Yeah. And, when you're at a trade show or even not at one of those shows, how do you come across authentic and not be that person? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I mean, you be authentic and don't be that person, I think one of the biggest things that I hear when I hear people talking about salespeople and having bad experiences with them is that the person didn't listen to them. When you think about the car salesperson, you're like, I told them I wanted this and they didn't even listen to me at all. They didn't care, and it has nothing to do with the fact that their shoes were real shiny or their pants were real creased or whatever. It has everything to do with the fact that they just didn't care and didn't listen. And so if you come at it from a perspective of being like, I've done everything I can to try to understand how I'm going to solve this problem for you, and now I'm going to listen to you, it doesn't, the weirdness and the smarminess goes away when someone's listening to what you have to say.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, my advice is just be self-aware. Flipping your card to every single person within 30 seconds of meeting them is not a good idea.
We won't do that networking event.
Yeah, just never do that. But I think you're right. Just being authentic in your own way, listen, repeat what they said. That tells people you listen to them. Some things like that.
Definitely techniques. I mean, there's even ways. You are listening, but there's ways to even kind of reinforce that you are synchronized and that you're listening to them and things like that.
Yeah. So that's something that I think as you keep developing this teaching, this concept, I think you're doing a great service to a lot of founders. Touching on that is really important, which is it's not just okay, you need to go get sales and here's what you do, but it's actually how do you act? How do you create a better connection with someone in person so that they trust you enough to maybe go down the road of being your customer?
Yeah.
That's really important, and I think maybe we take it for granted, and there's a lot of people out there that might not be as comfortable.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. So let's talk about the specific, okay, let's say you're in the meeting or the sales specific process to then get to a close? Clearly, it's a couple different meetings most of the time.
Yeah.
What is that process in the way that you see it running through?
Well, so one of the things is, after figuring out your channels, you have to, I teach people how to essentially map the process. There's a couple reasons why. One is just so you understand the process, but the other one is so that you can also plan your year. There's certain times of the year that you're kind of wasting your time prospecting. People aren't in the office. People aren't going to answer email. Like Christmas, don't bother.
Right.
Certain times in the summer, don't bother. People aren't going to do it. And so it's helpful to also know some people who are selling enterprise or B2B services or products can only sell during certain times of the year because of budget cycles or budget approvals. And so there's that part of the process, and understanding the things that maybe you have no control over whatsoever because you just have to fall in with what the existing, organizational structure of the industry does. So there's that. But the other one just being, it's really important to understand that you're not always be closing. Like, don't know, I think that gets misinterpreted. Really, I like to just think about like, how can you bring value to each interaction, and how can you move them along to the next step, which is the next conversation, the next follow-up. When are we going to like touch base on this next? I'm going to get you this information. You're going to get me that. Let's talk about it next Tuesday. Those sort of things that just kind of keep the ball moving. That's how you move things through your pipeline to close them. It's not like, get out your credit card right now, I'm going to give you a screaming deal. That's not how you close accounts,
Yeah, and so, of course, many industries and companies and product cycles are different, but at what touch point would it be appropriate to basically say, all right, here's time to get going and let's sign on the line and get a check going?
Yeah, well, so a lot of lingo is thrown around about sales that I think once you really understand what the lingo means, it explains a lot. So for instance, people talk about leads all the time. I'll give you leads. I have a lead. I know a guy, he's a lead for you. No. Like, a name of a person. But I can also get that on the internet for free. What a lead is someone who has a need, wants it solved, and is willing to move to the next step, or willing and comfortable with moving to the next step. So, when you think about it that way, leads suddenly become very valuable. They have to have a need, want it solved, all those things. And then when someone's in opportunity stage, that means that the decision maker has been engaged. So the decision maker is aware of you. They know about the product, all of that stuff. There's a budget identified. Even if you don't know what it is, there is a budget identified, and that there's a timeline. And so there's a couple different techniques to figure out what the timeline is, to fall in on the budget, to things like that, to help you move things through the opportunity stage. But when you get to the point where your opportunity is filled out, you're like, all the pieces are here. Now it's time, based on the timing of when this is supposedly going to become a thing, for me to, call the customer and say, are we doing this or not? Can I send you guys the contract? So it's never, you should never that often be in a position where you're like, I'm going to go in and close it. I'm going to say the magic words and they're going to like nod. It doesn't work that way. It's like, okay, guys, typical next steps are, I'm going to get you the budget. You'll sign off. It'll go to AP. Here's the contract. When is your stuff shipping in? That kind of thing. And then it's closed.
Yeah. It sounds, it closes naturally, right? Yeah. And I do think that there are a few approaches, or I don't even want to use the word techniques, but there's techniques that someone can lead that process more efficiently. But yeah, in the end, look, the whole point is, if they want to be a customer of yours, they have a need, you have something to fulfill that, they should want to close quickly. Like they shouldn't be wasting it.
Matter for them.
Yeah, it's timely for them too. So, on this topic, what is one or two indicators that not the right fit and they don't really want to talk to you anymore?
Oh, there's a lot. One is they ghost you. But actually, that's not always the case. We are entrepreneurs and we move fast. We do things fast. We follow up fast. We say yes fast. We say no fast. Our customers aren't necessarily that. I had a customer just last week who I thought had ghosted me. And I was disappointed because it was a really, really exciting customer. And I was at a trade show and I just sent an email and I was like, hey, you here? Great to see you. And he says, oh yeah, we're in the booth having happy hour. Come on by. And I stopped by the booth and he says like, oh, hey, I've got a conference room ready to go. And I'm a conference room. I'm like, wow, that sounds serious. So I go back in this conference room and he's got all the materials out. He's like kind of ready to go to the next step. And I was just expecting to have a beer and say hello. And so, and he apologized. He says, I'm sorry, it's been a while, but our parent company, I had to jump through all these hoops, all this red tape. They made me try this avenue. They made me try that avenue. I had to do this. I had to speak to that before we could move forward with this. All the avenues have been exhausted. The parent company is now happy with the new decision being made to go with you guys. When can we get started? And I was like blown away, like, oh my God, I thought you were ghosting me. But so even when you think you're being ghosted, remember we're used to fast things. But one is if you are being ignored. After a while, you're probably wasting your time if they're totally ignoring you.
Yeah.
Another thing is if there's an obvious non-understanding of the value for what you offer. So if they are like, this is too expensive, and it's not that they're trying to object because of the expenses, they like legitimately have never paid for it or anything like this before and never really would. Sometimes you can just see like they're not just saying it's too expensive, they're saying I don't value this expense. And that's just something you learn over time. And another one is you'll start to learn through the process of going through this and building it for yourself what red flags are. So for me, one of them with our smaller customers, my page persona, is if they've never spent any money on marketing before, not even $1, then they're not ready for it.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that's just something you figure out. Like, have you ever spent any money on marketing? Nope. Okay, well, this is probably not going to work out. And then you start to find over time certain channels, unqualified customers tend to come through. They have certain attributes. You'll even start to pick up on certain turns of phrase that might be a red flag, just because every other unqualified customer always said that too, and so it takes a while. But I think the biggest one is like, you never want to be competing with free. If someone's like, well, I could get this for free, like, we'll just, either your product needs to be beefed up or you're not presenting the value enough, or they're not seeing the value to put you above free. So they're probably not the right customer.
Yeah, what comes to mind is it's just like, it's so important to qualify up front the type of customer they're going to be, and do they really need the product, or just exactly what you just said, because I think the next thought is, how important is it to really understand the right customers and bring them in, and try to minimize the bad ones. And we all know bad customers.
Yeah, so important. I mean, like, the wrong customers can ruin your business. I mean, you could be cleaning up the aftermath of a bad customer on your team for ages. And one of the things is, I don't usually hesitate too much to fire a bad customer because of the cost and the emotional turmoil that they're causing on the team. But you don't want to have to do that. It's awful. I hate doing it. It's usually a hard decision, and I do it, but just think like, if you feel like you might have to pull the trigger on that, then probably just don't say no in the first place, and move on,
Yeah. Okay, so this is all great. This is amazing stuff. So what about the companies though, or the startups that make something that they think just basically sells itself, and they think it's so great that people are going to knock their door over trying to get it, download it, use it? What is that a good strategy, or what would you say to that person that seems to be not thinking that sales strategy is right for them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any company that said that people just found them and it took off. I think when people do say that, I think it's kind of a lie. There's very few examples I can think of where something grew rapidly, virally, and one of them is Facebook. You know, and so like, you know, everyone's thinking like that they're going to be that other example. And you know, I think the old saying, like, it takes on average 7 years to become an overnight success, it's really true. Like, we thought that this thing just took off. In reality, it didn't. They were really, really building that foundation for a long time, and it just took off because they found the right channel where it just took off. But it took a minute. It took sometimes way longer than a minute.
Way longer. And so, you know, let's go there for a second, where maybe it's a consumer app, but their business is more media or advertising. Yet I think a lot of founders would be like, no, you know, like, this thing sells itself. Advertisers are gonna just come screaming. You know, what is there any thoughts on how companies like that would be able to go approach, you know, advertisers or others? How do they go scrappy, you know, to the wall to go get some of those companies?
Yeah, I mean, you prospect to them. Same way that you would, I mean, I'm a business. People approach me about advertising. You know, they say, hey, I have this really amazing, you know, video on demand delivery platform. It tends to get 24% conversion per event. And I'm like, you have my attention. Tell me about it. You know what I mean? Like, and so if you prospect to somebody who you think could be a potential big account and tell them, you know, you have to say, what's the pain? You know, somebody who's thinking about doing online advertising, for example, I don't know, 30% of banner clicks are bots, you know, or by accident, you know, or maybe even more. Maybe it's like 64% or something. So people are saying, oh my gosh, I'm putting all this money into online advertising and I'm not seeing any return on it. Oh, I could, you know, this is what we get on that. You should give it a try for 90 days. Hey, why not? You know, like, it's still a presentation, because everybody's looking for the thing that's going to maximize their advertising budget. And so you still need to figure out what your customer wants and needs, and you still need to figure out how to approach them and how to position your product and tell them why it's going to maximize this advertising budget. They're not going to like Google brand new platforms I've never heard of before that are going to advertising budget. Like, you know, they're busy. They're not sitting at their desk reading about, you know, they're not on product hunt. You know, your customer's not going to find you. You got to find them. You know, they're budget trying to answer for why their conversions aren't converting to sales.
Yeah, that's good. Man, this is amazing. We've covered a lot, and you know, it's about time to close down. But so again, let's review what's it called and where can people find more information?
Yeah, the course is called Roadmap to Revenue, and you can find it on my website, which is GenevieveLayMarchal.com.
All right, and so also, what can we expect come September? You know, even on Founders Live, as well as, you know, as you said, it seems to be more of after September, after Labor Day, you're going to get a lot more focused on, you know, the public launch. What do you plan on doing, you know, through the fall?
Well, so we have a waiting list for the course now, and I'm going to go ahead and treat those people who sign up in August sort of as beta. We have some bonus modules that are going to be part of the course. One of the bonus modules is Negotiation 101. That course in and of itself, or that bonus in and of itself, will probably pay you like 100x the course, you know, because a lot of people just don't really understand how to approach and structure a negotiation. So that's huge value. I originally learned negotiation, you know, formally trained in it several years ago, and it was one of the best things I learned. So I was like, I'm going to put it in the course because entrepreneurs need this.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of a natural part of sales, especially if you're maybe negotiating large agreements or contracts. There's another bonus that's going to be about essentially like triaging your cash flow. There's some people who are going to come into this course who are in dire, like they need the cash yesterday. And, you know, it's a great, nice, long process of building a super solid foundation and system that you can scale and it can serve you. But some people are like, money now, you know, and so I put a bonus in there that's like, here's a, you know, sort of a quick, how to get quick cash flow in the door now. It's more about recognizing the low hanging fruit and how to capitalize on it and close it to stabilize you so that you can then focus on the sustainable long-term strategy for yourself. So those don't release until September. And in September, what will come out is the self-study course, which is, independent study. You have lifetime access. It's videos, it's modules, it's worksheets, and it's an online private Facebook group for people like us, entrepreneurs, to talk about our sales pipeline and discuss, like, hey guys, I'm using this cool new platform. Genevieve doesn't teach it, but it's called this, and it's really neat, and here's a link, and just ideas. And I don't teach it. Hey, maybe I'm interested in learning more about that from you. But then there is a VIP course, and the VIP course is limited in enrollment. Only 10 people will be able to sign up, and it's limited in time. It's only going to be open for a couple weeks, and then it'll be closed down. And that's just because, like, I run a company, I don't have time. So, I'm going to choose 10 people and work with them independent or individually as part of the VIP course. So there's 2 tiers that you can choose, sort of depending on what it is that you need. And the VIP course is really just designed for individualized strategy. So saying, like, okay, you are in advertising, and this is what you're selling, and have you thought about this channel, and let's think about this way, and one of the ways you might want to tweak the systems that's taught to work more for you is a couple of these things, and I would suggest trying this, and here's a great place to go, and just things like that. I've had the opportunity to work across a lot of industries, so sometimes I can bring applicable industry knowledge just based off of what I've seen work for people before. So that's what you'll see coming out in September.
That is awesome. It's going to be a great fall for you, I can tell, and it's going to be a great fall for all of us, and especially on Founders Live. So I want to thank you, Genevieve, for your time.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yes.
I forgot to mention too, we're doing like brown bags, right? Or happy hour or something.
So yes, we will be planning on doing some interactive times that that either one or both of us will be online on Founders Live, and people can ask questions or chat or essentially AMA. So look forward to that. All right, and with that, we are signing off. See you later.
Bye.